My name is Maya Renfro. I am 29 years old. And 2 weeks before my wedding, my mother sat my fiancé down at her kitchen table, poured him a cup of coffee he didn't ask for, and told him I had been hiding a daughter from him for 11 years. She thought she was detonating something. She had no idea she was 11 years too late. Because Eli already knew. He had known for 3 years. He had known since the second month we were dating, when I sat across from him at a diner on Route 9 and told him everything, slowly, with my hands shaking around a coffee cup, certain he would leave. He didn't leave. He asked if he could meet her. My mother had spent 11 years guarding a secret that wasn't hers to guard, and she chose to use it as a weapon 2 weeks before my wedding, aimed at a man who had already met my daughter, already taken her to a father-daughter dance. She invited him to herself, and already asked me, privately, if he could be the one to walk her down the aisle alongside me one day. When my mother finished talking, Eli set down his coffee cup. He said 4 words that ended the conversation she thought she was starting. Before I tell you what those 4 words were, hit like and subscribe. Drop your city below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back to where this actually begins. Because to understand why my mother thought this secret still belonged to her, you need to understand what she did when I was 17. I grew up in Lansdale, a small town outside Allentown, Pennsylvania, in a house my mother kept so clean it sometimes felt like visiting a museum of a family rather than living in one. My mother, Diane Renfro, ran the front desk at a dental practice and ran our household with the same precision, everything labeled, everything scheduled, everything presented the way she wanted it seen by the outside world. My father left when I was 6. After that, it was just the 2 of us, and Diane built a version of our life that looked, from the porch, like it had never had a single crack in it. I got pregnant at 16. The father was a boy named Connor, who I dated for 4 months, and who moved to Ohio with his family before I even told him. I found out in March. I told my mother in April, sitting on the edge of the bathtub while she stood in the doorway, with an expression I had never seen on her before and have only seen twice since. She didn't yell. That would have been easier in some ways. She went quiet. She made a series of phone calls over the following 2 weeks to a cousin in Scranton, to a woman from her church, to a lawyer whose name I never learned. And then she sat me down and explained, in the calm voice she used when something was already decided what was going to happen. I would carry the pregnancy somewhere else. A program for teenage mothers 2 hours away, run by a religious organization my mother had found through her church network. I would finish my junior year of high school online. And the baby, when she came, would be placed for adoption through a closed arrangement my mother had already begun setting up before I'd had a chance to think about what I wanted. "This doesn't have to define you, Maya," she said. "We're going to handle this quietly, and in a year it will be like it never happened." I was 16. I believed her because I didn't know yet that I was allowed not to. My daughter was born in November. I named her Wren before they took her to the nursery, a name I'd chosen in secret because my mother had told me not to get attached enough to name her. I held her for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 minutes because I counted every second, the way you count things you know you're about to lose. The adoptive parents were a couple named the Halversons. Older, established, unable to have children of their own. My mother had vetted them herself. I signed papers I barely understood, guided by a caseworker who was kind in the brisk, efficient way of someone managing a process rather than a person. I came home in December. My mother redecorated my bedroom that same month. New curtains, a different bedspread, and I understood, without her saying it directly, that this was meant as a kind of erasure. A clean slate. The version of events she wanted both of us to live inside. We never spoke about Wren again. Not once, in 11 years, did my mother say her name, but I never stopped thinking about her. I finished high school. I went to college 2 hours away, partly for the program, partly because I needed distance from a house that had decided, on my behalf, what 12 days in a hospital room would mean for the rest of my life. I studied early childhood development. I have thought, many times since, about what that says about a person. I built a life. A career as a pediatric occupational therapist, an apartment in Bethlehem. a handful of relationships that never went anywhere, partly because I always reached a point usually around month 2 or 3 where I had to decide whether to tell someone the truth about myself, and most of the time I simply ended things before I had to. I want to be honest about something. The hardest part of carrying that secret wasn't the secret itself. It was the years of deciding over and over that the people I let close to me weren't safe enough to know who I actually was. When I turned 25, I did something my mother never knew about. I registered with a state mutual consent adoption reunion registry. A formal process paperwork, identity verification, a waiting period that exists for exactly one purpose, connecting birth parents and adopted children who both, independently, indicate they want to be found. I registered, and then I waited. For 2 years, nothing. Then, the spring I turned 27, I got a phone call from a woman at the registry office. "Miss Renfro," she said, "we have a match." Ren had turned 11 that November. The Halversons, Patricia and Daniel, had raised her in a town called Easton, 20 minutes from where I was now living without either of us knowing it. They had told her, gently and consistently throughout her childhood, that she was adopted, and they had supported her registering with the reunion service the moment she turned 11 and asked them if she could. The first meeting happened in a quiet park, supervised loosely by a counselor from the agency, the way these reunions are typically structured. I remember almost nothing about what I said. I remember Ren's face. I remember that she had my exact jawline, which I had genuinely never expected, the way you don't expect to see your own structure built into someone else's face. She asked me a question within the first 10 minutes that I have carried with me since. "Did you want to keep me?" I told her the truth. That I was 16 and scared and didn't fully understand, at the time, that I had a choice in how that pregnancy would be handled. That I had thought about her every single day for 11 years. That naming her had been the one thing I'd insisted on, quietly, before they took her away. She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm glad you named me Ren," she said. That was 2 years before the wedding. In the 2 years since, with the Halversons' full support and genuine warmth, Patricia and I now text regularly, and Daniel calls me Ren's other mom, with real affection, not territorial distance. I had built something with my daughter. Monthly visits, phone calls, a relationship that existed entirely outside my mother's awareness, because by the time Ren found me, I had made a decision. I was never telling my mother, not out of cruelty. Because I had finally understood, at 27, that the secret had never actually been mine to protect for her comfort. It had been my daughter's existence, my life, and my mother had forfeited her right to be part of how that story unfolded the moment she decided, on my behalf, that erasing it was the right approach. I want to stop here for a second. Have you ever carried something so heavy for so long that you forgot it was possible to simply hand it to someone and have them not drop it? Tell me in the comments. Because that is exactly what happened the night I met Eli Castellan. Stay with me. Eli and I met at a continuing education conference for healthcare professionals. He's a physical therapist. Our specialties overlap more than people expect. We talked for 3 hours at the hotel bar after the first day's sessions ended, and I went back to my room that night and texted my best friend, Priya, one line. "I think I just met someone I'm not going to be able to walk away from before month 2. We dated for 2 months before I told him. I want to describe what that conversation looked like, because it matters for everything that came after. We were at a diner on Route 9, a place we'd started going to on Sunday mornings. I had decided, somewhere around week 6, that I either needed to tell him or end things, because I was tired, genuinely, bone-deep tired of building something real on a foundation with a hole in it. I told him I had been pregnant at 16. I told him about the program, the adoption, the 11 minutes. I told him about the registry, about Ren, about the 2 years of monthly visits and texts, and the slow building of something with a daughter who already had 2 wonderful parents, and somehow still had room for me too. I told him my mother had no idea any of it had happened, because my mother had decided, on my behalf, that the right response to my pregnancy was disappearance. I finished talking. My hands were shaking around my coffee cup. Eli was quiet for what felt like a very long time. Then he asked, "What's her favorite subject in school?" Not a question about logistics. Not a question about my past relationship with Connor, or the legal status of the adoption, or whether this changed anything about how he saw me. He asked what my daughter's favorite subject was. Science, I said. She wants to be a marine biologist. That's a good one, he said. He reached across the table and took my hand. Can I meet her sometime? Not to push anything. Just I'd like to know her if that's something you'd want. I cried in that diner booth in a way I hadn't let myself cry in over a decade. Eli met Ren 4 months later at a casual lunch the Halversons were comfortable arranging. He brought her a marine biology book he'd found at a used bookstore, inscribed nothing, said almost nothing memorable, and somehow by the end of that lunch had become, in Ren's words afterward, pretty cool for an adult. Over the following 3 years, Eli built his own relationship with my daughter, separate from mine, careful and patient and entirely on her terms. He went to her school's father-daughter dance 2 years ago, an invitation Ren extended herself, after a conversation with Daniel that I wasn't part of and have never asked about, because it belonged to the 3 of them. He texted her on test days. He remembered her birthday without being reminded. He proposed to me 18 months later at the same diner on Route 9, in the same booth which he had reserved in advance with the owner's help. I want you to know, he said, sliding the ring across the table instead of kneeling, because he knew I'd find a public kneel mortifying, that I'm not just asking you, I'm asking into all of it. You, Ren the Halversons, your whole actual life, not the version anyone else decided to tell. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We set a date for the following October. We told my mother, of course, that we were engaged. There was no avoiding that conversation. And frankly, I wanted her at the wedding despite everything, because she was still my mother, and some part of me still hoped, foolishly perhaps, that enough time had made room for something different between us. What I did not tell her was about Ren. This was a deliberate decision, made jointly with Eli, and I want to explain why, because I know some people will hear this and think I was being cruel by omission. My mother had spent 11 years building a narrative in which my pregnancy and the adoption simply hadn't happened. She referred to my college years, when asked by relatives, as a clean, uncomplicated stretch of growth. She had never once, in over a decade, allowed herself or me to speak Ren's name in her presence. I had tried, twice, in my early 20s, to bring it up gently to ask if she ever thought about it, to see if there was room for a different conversation. Both times she changed the subject within 30 seconds, with the specific, brisk efficiency she used when something was, in her mind, already settled. I had no reason to believe a wedding planning season would create room for a conversation she had spent 11 years actively preventing. So Eli and I made a choice. We would not center the wedding around revealing Ren to my mother. Ren herself, when we discussed it with her and the Halversons, because we did discuss it, every step, with everyone whose feelings actually mattered in this, said she was comfortable not attending as a guest, given everything, but wanted to know that she existed, fully and without apology, in my life regardless of what my mother knew or didn't. I don't need her to know about me to know I'm real, Ren said. She was 13 by then, sharper than I had been at that age, in ways I was grateful for and slightly humbled by. I want to be honest. I didn't make this choice out of fear. I made it because I had finally learned, after years of therapy and Sunday mornings at that diner and slow trust built with a man who asked about marine biology before he asked about logistics, that I no longer needed my mother's approval to consider my own life complete. What I underestimated was how badly she still needed control over the narrative. 2 months before the wedding, my mother began what I can only describe, in retrospect, as reconnaissance. She started asking about Eli's family with unusual intensity. She wanted to know about his parents, his exes, whether he'd ever been married before. Normal mother of the bride curiosity, I told myself initially. Then she started asking about my 20s. Specifically, where I'd lived, who I'd dated, what I'd done during the 2 years after college that she described, pointedly, as the quiet years. I should have recognized it sooner. My mother does not ask questions casually. She gathers information the way she does everything methodically, with an end goal already in mind, even if the goal isn't yet visible to anyone else. 3 weeks before the wedding, Priya called me, upset. "Your mom called me," she said. "She asked if I knew anything about something that happened when you were a teenager. She used the word situation. Maya, I think she's figured something out." My stomach dropped. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about." But Maya, she sounded like she already knew, like she was confirming, not asking. I called Eli immediately. We sat at our kitchen table that night, the way we'd sat in that diner booth 3 years earlier, and talked through what this meant. "How would she even find out?" he asked. I thought about it, and then I remembered something, a detail so small I'd nearly forgotten it existed. The reunion registry. When Ren and I matched, the agency had sent a single confirmation letter to my last known address on file, the standard procedure to close out the paperwork loop, before I'd updated my information to my current apartment. My last known address on file was my mother's house. I had moved out of it permanently at 18, but for a span of several months during my early 20s, while finishing a temporary lease transition, I had used it as a forwarding address for some accounts. I had never thought to check whether that letter had ever arrived, or whether she had opened it. "She's known," I said slowly. "She's probably known for 2 years, maybe longer." Eli was quiet for a moment. "Then why now?" he said. "Why wait until 2 weeks before the wedding to do anything with it?" I thought about my mother, about the precision with which she operated, about the way she had handled everything in our family for 30 years, not impulsively, but with timing. "Because now is when it would do the most damage," I said. The call came on a Tuesday. My mother asked Eli to come by her house alone Sunday afternoon to talk about the wedding. She didn't invite me. Eli told her he had a previous commitment until 2, which was true, and agreed to come after. I want to tell you that I panicked, sent him in unprepared, sat at home wondering what was about to unfold. I didn't, because by then, Eli and I had already talked through exactly this scenario 3 days earlier, the moment Priya's phone call made clear what was likely coming. "If she tries to use this," I'd said, "I don't want you walking in blind." "I'm not walking in blind," he said. "I've known about Ren for 3 years. There's nothing she can tell me that's news. She might frame it as a betrayal, like I deceived you." Eli had looked at me steadily. "Maya, I was at her father-daughter dance. I know what Ren's favorite subject is. I know the name of her childhood goldfish. There is no version of this conversation where your mother tells me something I don't already know better than she does." He drove to her house Sunday afternoon. I stayed home, by mutual agreement, because we both understood this needed to be a conversation she had with him directly, not a confrontation orchestrated for my benefit, but the natural unfolding of whatever she actually intended to do. He told me everything afterward, in detail, sitting at our kitchen table with 2 cups of tea neither of us drank. My mother had let him in, offered coffee, made small talk about the wedding venue for several minutes. Eli said he could tell she was building towards something, the same brisk efficiency I'd grown up watching her use right before delivering decisions she'd already made. Then she set her coffee cup down. "Eli, I need to talk to you about something serious, something about Maya's past that I don't think you know," she told him. Carefully, deliberately, presenting it, Eli said less like a confession on my behalf and more like an indictment. She described the pregnancy at 16, the adoption, framing the entire arrangement as something she had handled generously to protect my future. She did not mention that I had been sent away with minimal input into the decision. She did not mention that I had named my daughter against her wishes, or that I had cried for the better part of a year afterward. She told him I had a daughter I had never disclosed to him. She used the word hiding. She said it twice. "I thought you deserved to know before you marry her," she said. "A man should know what he's marrying into." Eli let her finish completely. He didn't interrupt once, he told me, because he wanted to understand exactly what she believed she was accomplishing. Then he set down his coffee cup. "Ren," he said. My mother blinked. "What?" "Her name is Ren. She's 13. Her favorite subject is marine biology, and she wants to study octopuses someday because she thinks their problem-solving is underrated. I took her to her 6th grade father-daughter dance 2 years ago because she asked me to. I have her artwork on my refrigerator. I've known about Ren since the 2nd month I dated your daughter Diane, because Maya told me herself, sitting across from me at a diner, shaking, because she'd been taught her whole life that this was something to be ashamed of. My mother said nothing. "You didn't tell me a secret today," Eli continued. His voice, he told me, stayed completely level the entire time, the 4 words he'd later tell me he'd decided on, deliberately, before he even drove over. I already knew. The kitchen, he said, went completely silent. My mother sat very still. Eli said something moved across her face that he hadn't expected, not anger, not embarrassment exactly, but something closer to the specific disorientation of watching a plan collapse in real time because its central assumption had simply never been true. "You knew," she finally said, "for 3 years. For 3 years," Eli confirmed. "And I've known your granddaughter in some capacity for almost that long too. I've just never had the chance to tell you that, because you've spent 11 years making sure nobody could." My mother's hands, he said, were flat on the table. "I was trying to protect you, protect this family." "From what?" Eli asked. "From a 13-year-old who wants to study marine biology? From your own daughter who spent over a decade carrying something alone because you decided shame was the appropriate response to a 16-year-old's pregnancy?" She didn't answer. "I think," Eli said, standing up, "you came here today expecting to tell me something that would change how I see Maya. I want you to understand that it did. It made me admire her more, because she built an entire relationship with her daughter, in secret, in the middle of a life you spent years insisting that secret shouldn't exist in. She did that without you. She's going to keep doing it without you, if that's what this conversation today turns out to mean." He thanked her for the coffee. He left. My mother called me that evening. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to it twice before deciding how to respond. Her voice, on the recording, was smaller than I had ever heard it. Not performatively, so genuinely smaller. "I didn't know he knew," she said. "I thought I was. I thought you'd been hiding it from him. I thought I was helping." She paused for a long time on the recording. I could hear her breathing. "I think I've been hiding it from myself for 11 years, Maya. Not just from everyone else." I didn't call her back that night. I needed time, and I gave myself permission, for the first time in my adult life, to take it without guilt. We did speak, eventually, 10 days later, 4 days before the wedding. Not a full repair, I want to be honest about that, because this isn't the kind of story where 11 years of erasure gets resolved in a single conversation. But she asked, for the first time in over a decade, if I would tell her about Ren. Not to manage the narrative, to actually know. I told her some things. Not everything. Trust, I've learned, gets rebuilt in installments, not in a single transfer. She did not attend the wedding. We both agreed mutually that it wasn't the right moment yet. She sent a card. Inside, in her careful handwriting, she had written 4 words of her own. "I would like to know her. I have not yet decided what to do with that. Some doors, even when someone finally knocks correctly, take time to open." Eli and I got married on a clear October Saturday at a small vineyard outside Bethlehem. Ren was there not as a hidden detail, not as a secret managed around anyone's comfort, but exactly as what she is, my daughter. Patricia and Daniel sat in the 2nd row. Ren stood beside me during part of the ceremony, at her own request, holding a small bouquet of dried flowers she'd picked out herself. During the reception, she found me near the dessert table and handed me a folded piece of paper. "I wrote something," she said. "You don't have to read it now." I read it that night, after the guests had gone, sitting on the edge of the hotel bed in my wedding dress with Eli beside me. It said, "Thank you for naming me before they took me away. I think that's the first thing you ever gave me, and I've had it my whole life without knowing it was from you. I have it framed now. It sits on a bookshelf in our living room, next to a photo of Eli and Ren at that father-daughter dance, both of them laughing at something just out of frame. My mother spent 11 years trying to erase a chapter of my life because she believed shame was the appropriate response to a 16-year-old's mistake. She forgot that the people who actually loved me weren't waiting for a clean story. They were waiting for the real one. If this story reminded you of a secret you've been carrying alone, or a piece of your life you've been waiting for someone safe enough to tell, share it with someone today. Drop a comment. Subscribe so the next story finds you. I'll see you there.